Hello 3D printing friends. Today on the BV3D channel I'll show you how to install and use the OctoKlipper plugin for OctoPrint to make it easier to use the Klipper firmware. Stick around and we'll get into it right after this. I'm Brian and you are watching BV3D. Hi everyone, welcome back. Before we get started, I wanted to say thanks to everyone who subscribes to the channel. And you, right there? Yeah, you. You're my favorite. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you along for the ride. Just click that subscribe button down there. Oh, and if by chance you're the kind of person who likes YouTube notifications, you can also click that little bell to get notified when I release new stuff. Okay, so in a previous video, we installed the Klipper firmware on our ANET A8 3D printer and its associated Raspberry Pi. And when we did that, we had to spend quite a bit of time in a command line interface, typing lots of commands to get Klipper installed and to get a basic configuration in place for the ANET A8. By comparison, OctoPrint has a much friendlier user interface. It's nicely organized and you can do a lot with just a couple of clicks. We can bring the advantage of that easier to use interface to the task of working with Klipper, and we do that by installing a plugin in OctoPrint. That plugin is OctoKlipper, and we'll install it from OctoPrint's settings screen. So let's get on the computer and get into OctoPrint. We'll open a new web browser window and connect to octopi.local. Then we'll click the wrench icon to get into OctoPrint's settings panel. In the OctoPrint section on the left, click Plugin Manager. In the main part of the settings panel, click the Get More button. Then we'll search the repository for Klipper. Now click the Install button on OctoKlipper. Once it finishes, it alerts us that we need to restart, so click Restart Now, then confirm the restart command. OctoPrint will restart and eventually you will get a Please Reload message. When you do, click the Reload Now button. Now, OctoKlipper changes the look of OctoPrint a little bit, and it makes it easier to work with Klipper. For instance, you'll notice a new Klipper tab over here on the tab bar. And the connection panel at the top left corner of OctoPrint has been replaced by an OctoKlipper panel with a connect and disconnect button and quick access to Klipper macro commands on buttons such as emergency stop. Restarting OctoPrint disconnected us from Klipper, so click the Connect button to reconnect to Klipper. Now that we're connected, let's go take a peek inside that new Klipper tab. And here we've got some handy buttons for common Klipper-related tasks. You can get Klipper's status. We have a couple of restart options. We can do a host restart, which resets Klipper and reloads its configuration. Or we can do a firmware restart, which does the same thing as a host restart, but it also clears any errors related to the part of Klipper that lives over on the printer. We have some tools buttons. There's assisted bed leveling, which moves the nozzle to specific points on the bed so we can adjust the leveling knobs. There's a PID tuning button to perform a PID calibration. There's a coordinate offset button so we can specify an offset for subsequent G-code commands. Does anybody have any thoughts about a good use for that? If you do, leave a comment. We can get a performance graph so we can see what Klipper's been up to, and this could help us debug Klipper issues. We have a place for macro buttons. Here's the eStop macro button, which is the same one as in the OctoKlipper panel over here on the left. Now, some of these functions need to be set up, so let's go explore what's available in OctoPrint's settings panel. And we'll click the wrench icon to get there. In the plugins category in the left, click OctoKlipper to show its settings. And we have 4 tabs here. We have a basic tab, macros, bed leveling, and Klipper configuration. In the Basic tab, we can specify the serial port, and remember, Klipper uses /TMP/printer. We have a checkbox to replace the connection panel, and that's checked by default, which is why the connection panel was replaced with an OctoKlipper panel. We can specify the path to Klipper's configuration, and that conceivably would give us the ability to switch between different configurations fairly easily. And we can specify whether to perform a restart or a firmware restart when Klipper's configuration changes. In the Macros tab, we can see the setup for the eStop macro button. A macro button is a grouping of one or more Klipper or G-code commands. And you give these a name and then choose whether they appear in the Klipper tab or in the sidebar. So with one click, you can quickly perform a task without having to remember all of the commands. The Bed Leveling tab helps us perform a manual bed leveling operation, and there are a few values we need to provide. There's probe height, And if you're leveling with a piece of paper, it says, set this value to the paper's thickness. A value of 0.1 millimeters is good here. Probe lift specifies how high the printer raises the nozzle before moving to the next point. Probe feed rate Z specifies how fast to move the Z-axis while performing our leveling operations, and feed rate X and Y specifies how fast to move the X and Y axes while we're leveling. Then we come to probe points, and there's only one point set up, and it's at X0 and Y0, which really isn't very useful. Well, let's add 3 more points, and then we'll set their coordinates to represent the 4 corners of the bed. Alright, so let's give them some useful names and coordinates. The bed size on the ANET A8 is 220 by 220, and I think probing 30 millimeters in from each corner will do nicely, so we'll set these as follows. 0 we'll call left front, and we'll specify it as 30 on the X and 30 on the Y. Point 1 we'll call right front, and we'll set that at 190 on X and 30 on Y. That 190 millimeter value is the 220 millimeter bed size minus 30 millimeters. We'll set this point to be left rear, and we'll set that at X30 and Y190. And we'll set this point as right rear, and we'll set that at 190 and 190. Let's click the Save button to save these values. Now doing so closes the settings panel, so let's click the wrench icon again to get back into settings, and then get back into OctoKlipper's settings. And then we're back again in bed leveling. So the last tab in OctoKlipper settings is Klipper configuration. And this is the whole reason I wanted to show you this plugin. This lets you directly edit Klipper's configuration file, and this is a very powerful feature. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility. If you want to be cautious about things, I recommend copying the entire contents of the configuration, pasting it into a text file, and saving it on your computer. That way, if you accidentally mess up, you've got a known good configuration you can paste back in to get up and running again. Now, the reason I thought this was important enough to make an entire video about is this. As we start tuning Klipper to try and get the best performance on the ANET A8, we're going to be editing Klipper's configuration file. And having the ability to dive right in here and make a quick change rather than having to open an SSH client and log into the Raspberry Pi will really make things easier. Now, I'm comfortable doing things in a command line interface, but a lot of people aren't. And if there's a tool that'll make it easier for more people to get something done, why not install it? I mean, the whole point of computers is they're supposed to make things easier, right? Right. Okay, so when we want to make adjustments to Klipper's configuration, this is where we're going to do it. Because not only does this make it easy to edit the configuration, it also takes care of restarting Klipper whenever we save changes to the configuration. So those changes will take effect right away. Now, I don't want to make any changes to Klipper's configuration in this video though, so let's close the settings panel and go back to the Klipper tab in the main OctoPrint user panel. Because what I do want to do is try out the assisted bed leveling, so let's click the assisted bed leveling button. Ah, cool, there's the probe points that we set up earlier. So let's click the Start button, which will move through each of the probe points in turn. And as the printer moves to each probe point, we can adjust the height as needed. Once we have one point set, we can click Next to move on to the next probe point. And we'll keep doing that until we've got all 4 probe points adjusted. Now, I only made one lap around the bed, but it's a good idea to go around multiple times because as you adjust each corner, it changes the other ones just a little bit. Just keep running through the process until you're not having to adjust the knobs anymore. For me, this takes about 3 or 4 times around the bed. So that's the OctoKlipper plugin. It was easy to install, it's easy to use, and it'll make it a lot easier to adjust Klipper's configuration in future episodes. And speaking of episodes, this one's just about done. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down, but either way, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you like the content that I'm producing, consider supporting the channel with a one-time micropayment. You could buy me a coffee or leave a little something in the PayPal tip jar. Links for both of those are down in the description. Well, I'm going to go experiment a little more with Klipper, and then I'm going to print something cool. You do the same, and I'll see you next time.